And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pulse. I'm Paul Quigley, and I'm joined today by my guest, James Wright. He is the global CEO of Red Havas US and the global chairman of the Havas PR Collective. James, welcome to the Pulse.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be with you today.
So James was previously the MD of Havas Global Melbourne, then later CEO of Red Havas Australia, and then later the MD of Havas PR Asia Pacific before taking on the current US and global roles. He's many years active as well in the PR Institute of Australia. And going to be very, very interesting and a topic that I think everyone can relate to at the moment. We're going to be talking about internal communications and mixternal communications, how internal and external are becoming one. Before we jump into the topic, we're going to just, while we're live, please add any questions you have in the chat. Our show's producer, Danielle, can triage those and we'll try and get to them as we're coming. This is an interactive live webinar. And so we'll welcome any questions to come through. And before we jump right into our main topic, given your unique and kind of global perspective, James, I wanted to ask just before we jump into this topic, your understanding of what's changing in the global PR landscape today and how Red Havas can thrive in that changing landscape.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, for me, the world of public relations and strategic communication has never been so important in building trust, relationships, and brand than it has been today. I mean, these past 2 years have seen our world change forever, not just in terms of how we work, but how we live, how we interact, how we build our lives and our communities. And yeah, the pandemic has been a core driver of that, but it's also seen, key social issues be elevated to planes that we just haven't seen before. There's a huge amount of interest, focus, and energy being put into progressing issues like equal justice, equity and diversity, pay and working conditions, benefits. And we've really, over the last couple of years, reappraised and reset what is important to us individually, as families, as communities, and as a workforce. And in turn, businesses and organizations and governments have had to do the same. And throughout this, we've also seen an even greater acceleration towards a digital world as more and more sectors and industries really grasp the nettle and transformed. And some of that transformation was forced on the businesses from the pandemic. Others, it was also an opportunity to change how they shaped and sold their products and services as people stayed at home, worked at home, schooled at home, and communication was there throughout, communicating how the business was going to track through the pandemic, keep the workforce safe and those wheels turning. How the business was changing and transforming had to be communicated to all stakeholders, internal and external.
Okay, and that's been a huge opportunity for the industry. What's the biggest challenge in the landscape for PR and communications today?
Well, I think that ever since I've started out in PR and comms, the biggest battle has been for talent. However, since the pandemic has seen borders close and people move out of cities for a while, and some have yet to return, and people reassess their careers, it's really turned into a dogfight on an increasingly barren wasteland. And I was talking to someone about this the other day. If it was a battle for talent and it was a film, it'd be Mad Max. The lack of good talent in the pipeline is for me, though, also being detrimental to the industry. It's leading to a false economy. We've seen salaries skyrocket across the PR and comms industry at every level. People have moved around into new elevated roles that they may not have been ready for. Some people have left the industry. I mean, I do believe we are seeing a rebalance now here in the end of 2021 and into 2022. But we have to work together as an industry within agencies and in-house with our industry bodies and with our education and training partners to readdress this. And for us at Red Havas, and I speak to our MDs and CEOs around the world every week, all across the Havas group, our biggest barrier to growth has been the development of talent and being able to attract and retain talent. They're just not there. But it's a balance to be struck as well. How far do you go to make your workplace attractive as this kind of pyramid of authority in organizations has pretty much flipped as employees have gained more authority in being able to direct what they want when they want it. But how far do you go to meet these new evolved expectations? And we have focused on that evolution as well, and changed our own work policies, as of course our clients have. We've put a much greater focus on things like physical and mental well-being, improving our health insurance and benefits, plus adding more holiday options, even greater flexible working arrangements. And we were quite progressive before, but it's a balance. And we still have responsibilities to shareholders and our clients to deliver. So we also need to make sure we're making money at the end of the day.
Of course. And like this is an excellent segue into our topic today, when we're in the Mad Max stage of battle for talent, and so much talent is already in your workforce. So much is in the new people coming in, and need to retain, inspire, communicate internally. What led to your recent report, which we're going to talk about today, called Red Sky Thinking, a whole new world of employee engagement, 5 internal comms trends? This is just for our audience as well. This is a report we're going to really drill into, because there's some very interesting trends here on internal communications. And Danielle will share the link to this report in the chat. But what precipitated the report, James?
Yeah, I think it was almost like a volcano erupted when the pandemic happened, and clients were coming to us and saying, look, we need to improve how we're communicating to not just our stakeholders, but in particular internal audiences. People are concerned, people are concerned about their health and well-being, about safety, whether they're going to be able to keep the job as people either switch to online sales, or to working from home, or some other business transformation that happened. And so there was a huge amount of concern within the workforce. And what we also saw was that a lot of those concerns were being raised in media, in external media. And it was very important at that time that what was being communicated internally was also reflected in the external communications. And we have a lot of clients that do sort of annual health checks in terms of surveying their staff about what they're good at, what they could improve, and they needed to do that much more regularly. And they really needed to reassess those internal comms channels and see if they were strong enough to be able to continue to communicate in what was a very, very changed world, where suddenly, the amount of feedback they were getting from employees wasn't just a handful of people, but it was everybody, as the pandemic pervaded every part of our life, and people were concerned about, whether they could keep their jobs. And this is where this concept of Mixternal has emerged. This is, Mixternal communications is really an integrated strategic approach to engage both internal and external audiences through coordinated efforts in messaging, in content, and in channel strategy, right? So that's what we've been working on with clients, helping them improve their internal communications, helping them ensure that their internal external messages match, because if they didn't, then that potentially was a reputation risk. And for most businesses, they've really kind of, I guess, embraced that, because they've had to, right? They've had to be able to talk to their people in a much more consistent and ongoing way.
This is the messaging inside out. And what I like about how this is introduced in the report is the quote: internal comms is like therapy, but in the effort to show up, it's not just you who benefits, everyone around you does too. So, good internal communications affect the ecosystem around the company too. And when I kind of looking at how these inconsistencies can emerge, and, you can get the situation of an internal communication that doesn't match, or an external communication that doesn't match internal reality. And when I put my media monitoring hat on, one source of insight or learning about where those things might be on social media. Gripe, people saying things on Twitter, on subreddits. Are these useful places to watch for this kind of inconsistency emerging, or a perceived inconsistency between how a company is describing itself, but how the employees are describing it?
Yes, I mean, everywhere you can get the intelligence on how your workforce is feeling is great, but really you want to be having an early warning system and more regular touch points and ways in which you can learn how your employees are feeling beyond them griping on other social channels. I mean, what we've seen is this much greater emphasis on internal communication, and if you've got that greater emphasis, then it fortifies the way a company presents its own values, its identity, its strengths, and its strategy to employees and the public. The research is there. If you're known for treating your people well, then you're more likely to be liked by consumers and stakeholders. I mean, there was a report last year from Mercer that showed that 45% of employees who felt they received really good support from their employers during the pandemic are far less likely to leave. And that's really important to hear that and to be able to recognize that. And from a comms perspective, people first companies who take an inside out approach to message development, considering how employees will react before they go public with a message, is also important as well. I mean, I really believe you should be talking to your employees first and bouncing, new policies and new campaigns, new ideas off them. One person told us in our research, a very senior executive, that if employees are really going to become brand advocates, and I think all employees when you work for a business should be your greatest brand advocate. They need to know at least 25% more than what this person described as the street in advance of news going out. It's how you get them excited about the news, and also how to test how the street will take it. And they can also spread the word. I think this is something that a statistic I found really kind of quite stark, was that we found only 3% of employees share content about their company, but those shares are responsible for driving a 30% increase in the total engagement that a company sees on social. So employees as brand advocates is often a missed opportunity, but we're seeing that change by the increased budget lines we're now seeing against campaigns and activations that are run internally.
That's a really interesting insight. And so there's two things there. There's both your employees as brand advocates and also as a very knowledgeable base to test messages with. I mean, just imagining that internally, if we had some new messaging and ideas and I share that with our sales and CS team, I mean, they're going to know so well how well it fits reality and how well it will land with or ultimately our customers. So, that sounds like a very true source of insight. We've been jumping right into the principle of messaging inside out. But there's other principles in the report that we should spend a little time on, James. And the first in the report is more consistent communication as the employees' love language. Can you tell us about this consistent communication and what should people who are advising executives be advising them today?
Well, employees are hungry for information. I think that we've kind of already discussed this, but they want to know about the state of the company. As we've already discussed, this is everything from what is the current and post-pandemic work arrangements, what is the company's position on societal issues. The appetite for more transparency and clarity, I think, is increasing. It's certainly not waning by any means. And many companies and businesses have embraced that, some more readily and some more reluctantly, but there is a recognition there that it has to be done. And it happened very, very fast as well. Initially, it was coming, as I mentioned before, from our clients' own internal channels where they were getting a lot of questions. And then you had this kind of like volcano erupting with employees wanting information on how the business would navigate the pandemic. What would they be able to keep their jobs? How would they be able to do it safely? And consistent communication isn't new, but it served as a healthy reminder of that old adage, which is, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Almost all of our clients polled and surveyed their staff regularly beyond the annual temperature checks. And for many, we supported them to do that. It helped them keep a regular pulse on what was important. And firstly, as I mentioned a couple of times now, it was clear that workers wanted health and well-being and safety to be paramount. And they wanted to know what the business was doing, what was its plan, how would the vision change, if at all, how would they be looked after, kept in the job. Also, they wanted to hear it from the very top, from the CEO. There was an acceptance that it was okay at that time to say, for a CEO to say that it was, that they didn't know what they the way through yet, but they were working on it. And, for CEOs who are programmed to know everything all the time, to have all of the answers, it was quite a changer in communication, but also that kind of idea of being honest about, hey, look, we don't know yet, but we're working through it. That also build trust. And I think that, companies now understand that a clear vision and consistent communication about that vision is the best way to alleviate employees' concerns and anxiety. It's also a complement to the resources that many employees are putting against, the likes of mental health and well-being.
And I mean, practically speaking, you could sending the same message again and again in the same way doesn't work, right? So it's about delivering that message in different formats and ways, or delivering messages in different formats and ways. Have you seen any examples of how to do that best, or companies that have been doing that well?
Yeah, I mean, at Red Havas, we talk about ourselves as a merged media agency, where recognizing that all of the channels and ways in which we're being hit with communication messages are all merging and becoming one of the same. So we talk about one story, many shapes. It has to be one story, but it can come to life in different shapes in different channels. Paul, you and I have talked in the past about Starbucks in the US, which became almost the barometer for the reopening of retail, because Starbucks is on pretty much every street corner and on every block in most cities across the US. When Starbucks looked to open its door, was almost like a way in which everybody could recognize that actually it was okay to go back and get a coffee from the local coffee shop, and perhaps also go to a supermarket rather than order online. And they were very consistent about how they were going to do that, in terms of talking in a very Mixternal way about how their employees were going to be kept safe, how you were going to be kept safe as a consumer, how their suppliers were going to be kept safe. And for quite a while, their CEO became quite high profile. And in the past, their CEO had been quite, I would say, have been quite media shy, but suddenly, they were suddenly in the spotlight because they became the barometer. So I thought they were a great example.
Great. Yeah. Well, this is a related topic here when I'm thinking about communications and applying this lesson of consistent communications, even, in NewsWhip, and to myself. One of the principles is moving, in your report, is moving from dialogue to multilogue. And, I think the report references, town halls that can be too presenty versus creating more informal places and other kind of spaces for communication. And, the town halls can be a bit presenty, and I'd like to have more of this dialogue and multi-log. So how do you do that? How do you make that move?
Well, I think as we've seen, the changes and the transformation that we've seen, and the issues that the pandemic and some of these societal issues have hit us all, that pervaded all of our lives at every level. And we've seen internal comms become more valued by senior leaders, and we've seen that both in terms of the effort and resource behind it and the budget lines. We're also tracking this kind of newfound willingness to participate in communications that is more accessible to employees overall. Most of the companies that we spoke to in our research, and most of the clients we work to, expect their executives to continue this shift away from a formal presentation style kind of town halls into more informal employee-led Q&A, ask me anything sessions that, our research shows it's building greater trust and demonstrates greater transparency and emphasizes, we're all in this together mindset. I mean, virtually all of the executives we interviewed in this white paper, Paul, have really accelerated this rollout of community bulletin boards, of instant messenger, of other collaboration tools to foster, their communities during COVID-19. And I don't think, anyone expects to return to the pre-pandemic, heyday of tons of presentations every week and the formality that comes with that. Instead, everybody's been leaning into these tools, whether it's, today we're talking on Zoom, or it's Teams, it's Yammer, it's Slack, it's all of those tools that a lot of companies have been using. But as I said earlier, there's been a real acceleration towards embracing these tools in a much more strategic way. And for some businesses who, have always had this on their radar, they've now really embraced it. And by giving employees more dedicated places to share, both informally and formally, companies are creating, safe spaces for them to express their thoughts and their ideas. And as a result, trust levels rise. And our studies show that people at high trust companies, 74% of them, report less stress. 166% more energy at work, higher productivity, fewer sick days, more engagement, less burnout.
Brilliant. It's a great thing to aim for. And in accomplishing a high trust company, this might be just one of the other principles in the report, which is experience is everything, and employees deserve an experience they won't forget while working in the company. So this is more than just the benefits, right? Maybe in the past we would have talked about my job plus my benefits. Now we're talking about an experience. Where did this insight come from?
Well, employee experience was identified as one of the most popular trends among internal communicators in 2020 and in 2021. And the executives we spoke to are treating experiences really holistically. They say it's as much about creating an experience around communicating business results as it is around creating experiences that inject fun into the workday. And something that we all desperately need right now is fun in our workday, as often it can feel quite jaded as we continue to either work from home or under different restrictions and different circumstances if you're actually on the shop floor in whatever role you're in. For instance, one international business created a series of employee-led edutainment programs that tapped into employees' passion for food and their artistic clients. These programs were delivered through their existing digital platforms. Some of those platforms had evolved over the period of the last couple of years, and they were made available around the clock for employees via web or mobile, and they could be enjoyed live or on demand. And companies are also enabling employees to curate their own experiences, such as virtual book clubs, meditation classes, yoga classes, whatever that might be. And some are even creating experiences for employees' children. I mean, Twitter debuted its Camp Twitter program, which was an 8-week offering of live and on-demand activities and classes for kids to keep them busy and happy, as a lot of them were obviously at home, or whether it was being homeschooled or otherwise. They invited parents to attend live stream webinars led by psychologists and health experts. And a lot of these sort of experiences that were either for their employees or for the employees' families, were initially launched as temporary programs, but they're living on.
There's a very interesting flip side to the experience thing. We're talking about all of the positivity and the creation of an experience, but when we did our analysis of I suppose engagement on social media with a lot of strikes that happened towards the end of last year. There were some major strikes in the US at Nabisco, Frito-Lay, and Kellogg's. We noticed the content that went most viral and got the most engagement was kind of first-person perspectives on working in these companies, stories about working in the factories provided by an employee as a kind of day in the life. So this is my experience working, and this being much more engaged with story than any of the statistics or statements from unions or other things about the strikes. So, experience clearly resonates on the other side as well. So there's a flip side reason to pay attention to it as well, as if it's bad, that's the story. That's what's going to drive the story outside of your company too.
Well, Paul, I think we've remembered over the last couple of years that we're all human, and human stories have always resonated well. But at a time when the fragility of life and indeed our livelihoods has come into really sharp focus, it's sad that we can see one death as a tragedy, but 100,000 as a statistic, as is said. But we need to tell those stories that provoke thinking and conversation and generate progress. And if that's told through the lens of the first person who's actually experienced it, then I think at a human level you can really connect with that right now, because everybody's feeling that fragility. And so I think that was a big play. But also again, coming back to the digital technology, it's also that digital technology is giving us a view on how organizations operate. Even the police, as we've seen in very high profile situations, come to life on our screens and right in front of our eyes.
And with this this maybe also this links in with the last big trend that you identified in the report, James, which is comms must lead with empathy, accountability, transparency. And we didn't have the word vulnerability there, but that maybe goes with a bit of humanity and empathy. But is this this recognition of more common humanity? Is this a temporary change precipitated by us all going through a pandemic experience together, or have things just shifted and this is now a longer term starting point for communications?
I think it's very difficult to talk about long-term trends in terms of how we react as human beings, because that's human nature, is that things change, and we would never have guessed we would be here 2 or 3 years ago. The situation we're in, personally, professionally. I mean, the overwhelming adversity we have experienced and continue to experience during this pandemic has reintroduced to us all that kind of shared humanity experience, and this has proved to be extremely clarifying for many employers who made their employees the top priority, and some of this is for communication. Sorry, some of this for some businesses that was for the first time. We talked about executive communication not being as traditional and as formal as it used to be, and as another global exec told us that to put people first, you have to bring humanity in. However, it has also been a bit of a trial by fire to understand how, where, and when to communicate with employees during this crisis. I mean, not only were most of us working from home, but some did so with young children tugging at their clothes, while others worked in complete isolation. The unmet needs were many and unique to every worker. Is it a temporary change, or is this going to be a longer term change? I think now that employees are leveraging this newfound influence that they have, they're helping reshape the world of work to drive greater meaning, relevancy, and value to them. I mean, for example, workers today want more control over when and where they work, and you probably can see that yourself in your organization and the clients you're talking to, Paul. A Harvard Business Journal poll found that 76% of workers believe that employees will be more likely to prioritize their family and personal interests over proximity to work. And people will pursue jobs in locations where they can focus on both, and even if that means taking a pay cut, and you need to hear that as a business, and employees' lists of requests and these kind of new needs and benefits they're looking for. It doesn't end there. Expectations about what you can do for me now include employers helping employees develop new skills and continue to grow. And so, there's been a big focus on learning and development as well during this time. Yeah.
No, I think when you put on your human hat, you see a lot of the benefits of the current world, and it's great that the cards are stacked this way. When you put on your company hat, sometimes, yes, it's pretty Mad Max, and we're adjusting very rapidly to the new world. Here's just a tactical question, James, that's come in just while we have 1 minute at the end, which is that channels like TikTok, Reddit are very open comms forums, and places where employees might be found. How do you convince companies that are risk adverse about exploring doing the kind of communications that might take place there in TikTok or on social media?
I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we used to have social media guidelines for employees, what you can and can't say about the business, what you can and can't do. And I think it's really sort of switched now to actually how do we, like we were talking about before, how do we create employees into brand advocates? How do we give them assets and opportunities to share those great experiences they're having? How do you use those platforms, the internal and external or Mixternal we're talking about now, and be cool and happy and actually kind of feel confident that no matter what my employee puts out, whether it's external or internally, it's not going to affect the reputation of the business, but actually potentially provide some level of insight into how we do our business, or indeed the personality of the organization. So I think it's about giving them assets and opportunities to express themselves. And I think that's also part of what we've seen in this change of influence for employees, is really employers really embracing that everybody is an individual and allowing them to express themselves. And if you allow people to do that in the right environment, then actually you can be more successful. And so, I've seen a lot of great clients now provide kind of assets and opportunities to really help drive external social campaigns from their employees. And I think that's been important too, as well, to drive that sort of course of fun that we were talking about, bring fun back into the workday. And what better way to do that than and doing a few jigs on TikTok.
That's right. Well, James has been very, very useful and interesting for me personally, as well as in the context of the Pulse, to talk about this great big context shift with you. So thanks for making the time to join us today. For anyone who wants to get that report, it's Red Sky Thinking, a Whole New World of Employee Engagement, 5 Internal Comms Trends. Link is in the chat and can be found on the Red Havas website. For Pulse, Friends of the Pulse, we'll see you in February. We'll be announcing our guest for February shortly. And for James, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're very welcome, Paul, and really enjoyed the chat.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, and take care out in the Mad Max world, everyone. Bye-bye.